And we're going to go to Senate Bill 6298 concerning the duty of the clergy to report child abuse or neglect. And Senator Frame, this is your bill, so we're going to hear from Allison, staff, and then we'll move on to brief. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Allison Mediola, committee staff, and before you is Senate Bill 6298, sponsored by Senator Frame. And as mentioned, this bill has to do with mandated reporters and child abuse and neglect. Clergy, as you know, are mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect. And under this bill, the reporting requirement does not apply to information members of the clergy obtain in penitential communication, which means a communication made through the spoken word, made privately to an individual member of the clergy, intended by the communicant to be an act of contrition or a matter of conscience, intended by both parties to be confidential at the time the communication is made, initiated by the communicant, and made in the manner and context that places the member of the clergy specifically and strictly under a level of confidentiality that is considered inviolate by religious doctrine of the member of the clergy. A member of the clergy does have a duty to warn DCYF or law enforcement when they have a reasonable cause to believe that a child is at imminent risk of being abused or neglected, even if that belief is informed by information obtained in part as a result of the penitential communication. Penitential communication does not mean providing spiritual direction unless taking place as part of a penitential communication. It does not mean religious counseling, individual or group therapy, an activity related to human resources or personnel management, clergy assignment work, communications between clergy, laity, or other members of the faith that occur outside the penitential context, activity related to church administration or management, internal judicial proceedings, discipline, or written communication. The clergy penitent privilege does not apply, and the member of the clergy shall report child abuse and neglect they have received from any source other than a penitential communication. A member of the clergy has a duty to report child abuse or neglect when the clergy is acting in some other capacity that would require them to make a report. Member of the clergy and elder are defined. Elder means a person holding a position of responsibility, spiritual authority, or other similar position formally recognized in the charter or governance documents or a religious organization. Member of the clergy means any regularly licensed, accredited, or ordained minister, deacon, priest, rabbi, imam, elder, or similarly situated religious or spiritual leader of any church, religious denomination, religious body, spiritual community, or sect, or person performing official duties that are recognized as duties of a member of the clergy under the discipline tenets doctrine or custom of the person's church, religious denomination, religious body, spiritual communication, or sect, whether acting in the individual capacity or as an employee, agent, or official of any public or private organization or institution. And there is no fiscal note to be requested. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I see Senator Warnick, do you have a question?
Thank you, and thank you for that very good explanation. And thank you, Senator Frame, for bringing this back. I do have a question on, and I'm trying to understand the numbers on this. The copy I have, it's page 9, and it's under J6, I believe. It's these Roman numerals drive me crazy. I can't do it. Yeah, we should. It's the paragraph that said, regardless of G1 of this section, a member of the clergy has a duty to warn. That does that, to me, that almost negates the paragraph ahead of that. That would be J4. So can you tell me the difference between?
Sure, and that's the part that I mentioned that despite the penitential communication, that if the member of the clergy believes that the child is at imminent risk of child abuse or neglect, then they would have a duty to warn.
Okay, and
And I'm sure that Senator
wait
Frame would
for
have
the-
something more
for
to
the-
add to that.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate the work that you've done on this since
And I
last
think
year.
probably the prime sponsor can also speak to that, and then if there's more questions, we'll make sure that we have time to answer those. Yeah, and I see that Senator Frame has a question for Allison as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Allison, I just want to have you clarify, there is not currently a duty to report for clergy, broadly speaking, in current law. It's only that they have a duty to report if they're operating in another role that's already required, such as a member of the clergy is also a teacher. They would be required to report under that mandate. But simply being in the role as a member of the clergy, they do not currently have a requirement to report.
Well, you know,
Just want to confirm, because that is my understanding.
this was also my question when I was going through, because, you know, we've been through many iterations of this situation for a while. And I believe that they do have a duty to report. So, but I will double check that, because it's buried under host homes. That is what I will say, where it says host homes. It says clergy after that. But I will get back to you with the specific line and page.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to have clarity on that, because if you are a mandated reporter, you're a mandated reporter regardless of the time of day, if you are a mandated reporter. So I would like to know if someone has dual roles. My assumption would be that they would be a mandated reporter, but obviously want to make sure we have clarity on that, because that makes a big difference in kind of how we move forward, and also clarity around language, which is semantics or everything. So with that, I'm going to move us and keep us moving forward. If anyone else has, are you looking,
I'm looking.
you
I
found
have an
something?
answer. But yeah, but if
Okay.
not, if
Okay.
they were in the other capacity, like acting as a coach, any of those other activities, then they
Yeah.
obviously would be a mandated reporter.
Right.
But I will clarify that.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get clarity on that. And thanks, Allison, for all your work. And we're going to move to prime sponsor, and then we'll move ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Noelle Frame, State Senator for the 36th District. And I'll just share as we start. My understanding is we do not have a blanket requirement for mandated reporting, and I believe we're only one of 5 states in the nation that does not have such a requirement. So we'll get clarity, but that is my belief and understanding from which I bring this piece of legislation. As you'll remember from last year, colleagues, this legislation really came to light for me personally after some investigative reporting by Investigate West that revealed years of sexual and other abuse of children that had gone unreported in a particular faith community here in Washington state. And in that case, the rules of that faith tradition at the national level dictated that without a local law compelling the religious leaders to report child abuse and neglect, that they were simply not allowed to go to the local authorities. And we are trying to address that gap. The bill before you, colleagues, as we've all discussed, is a compromise solution with a requirement for all clergy, which is broadly defined to include all faith traditions, to report when they learn of child abuse or neglect, with a very narrowly defined exemption for penitential communication, which we just heard that very detailed list from Allison in the briefing. This is paired with a new duty to warn when clergy have reasonable belief that a child is at imminent risk of harm, even if that belief is informed in part by what they have learned with penitential communication. And to answer your question, Senator Warnick, what I was trying to get at here with this piece is that it's not that they know, it's not that they've been told, it's that they have a reasonable belief a child is at imminent risk of harm. And the idea here is that if they suspect that, and they suspect that based on observations outside of penitential communication, but they hear something in penitential communication that sort of seals it in their brain that they have a reasonable belief a child is at imminent risk of harm, that's when they have a duty to tell the department or tell law enforcement, go check on that child. That does not mean they're reporting the perpetrator to police. That means they are interrupting what they believe is imminent risk to that child. And that last piece of this proposal, colleagues, I believe is crucial to protecting children that are actively harmed, or being actively harmed, or maybe I should say. And we've had a lot of good conversation in this committee about the role of penitential communication and that these are acts of, as it says in the bill, acts of contrition, reconciliation, people trying to cope with mistakes that they've made in the past and asking for forgiveness. I understand that. This provides an exemption for that penitential communication, but what I cannot handle is the idea that a member of a faith community, a leader in a religious community, would stand on the sidelines when they have reasonable belief that a child is at imminent risk of abuse or harm. And that is the compromise that we have crafted in this bill. Child need trusted adults. They need to be able to believe when they tell adults in their life that something's happening to them, that they will do something about it. You all know my own story. I will not repeat it. I really hope this is the middle path. And I really hope that we can move out this bill today, or not today, but we will move this bill out this session and make this the law. Children are counting on us to protect them, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Frame. And any questions for Senator Frame? I will say thank you, Allison, that it appears that clergy do not have a duty to report in the capacity as clergy. So appreciate that clarity. Important to make sure we know. All right, with that, and we will now open testimony on Senate Bill 6298, Clergy Child Abuse Reporting. Vice Chair Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have 3 panels. Our first panel will be Christopher Marino Hardin and Larry Shannon. I believe they're both remote.
So Christopher, if you want to promote yourself and then begin to speak. Good morning.
My full name is Christopher Marino Hardin. I usually go by Marino. I was a Jehovah's Witness whistleblower at the Investigate West investigation, and I support SB 6298. I'm most concerned with the clergy penitent privilege. If the concept of mandatory reporting is to eliminate the bystander effect, I believe that the confessional exemption effectively codifies the bystander effect. And one of the common issues that we see with high control religious groups is a tendency to abuse clergy penitent privilege as a loophole to avoid reporting. Broad wording around the confessional privilege allows any religious organization to simply adjust their policies to require all investigations to be kept secret as part of their tenets and customs. A confession from the perpetrator or a confession of inaction from a third party or a request for help from a victim or a full panel interrogation for internal punishment, all of these are required in Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, and other groups, and these groups have all couched these confessions in court, and then the victim cannot subpoena the documents or compel testimony. I can provide multiple recent court cases where Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and other groups have used this defense for large internal investigations. 5 states have mandatory reporting with no exemption. This year's compromise bill is less than we'd like it to be. It puts us in a leading category like Texas, but the narrow definition.
Christopher, thank you. You were speaking. I'm telling you, you had quite a bit to say. Would love to have you please submit your testimony, and I know you have knowledge around this, and I know that we're all interested in that. So I appreciate your testimony today. Please feel free to send it in, okay?
Thank you.
Sorry to cut you off. Next up is Larry Shannon.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you and speak in support of 6298 mandatory reporting. Mandatory reporting laws are one of the most effective tools we have to identify abusers, ferret out abusers, and most importantly, perhaps, also prevent future abuse from happening. Unfortunately, as you've heard, our law in Washington has one big hole. This bill will fill it. And while I respect the comments of the gentleman who came before me, in the art of the possible, we support this compromise middle ground as it's been put forward. I want to just say, I know in the interest of time here, this compromise creates what I call a black box of confidentiality that would still exist around the confessional setting, and respect that and respect the faith traditions that have that, while at the same time creating the mandatory reporting for all other areas of information that comes to their attention. I think it's a middle ground approach that can work. I think it's superior to what other states have done. I really appreciate the hard work of the sponsor, and we commend it to you and hope you'll move it forward. And thank you again, Madam Chair, for hearing it out.
Thanks so much, Larry. Good to see you today, and I appreciate your testimony. Senator Kaufman.
Hey, Larry. Hey, Larry. Okay, next we have some individuals in person. We're going to call up Timothy Law, Jean Hill, and Christiana DeLone.
Timothy, you may begin.
My name is Tim Law. I'm here on behalf of Ending Clergy Abuse and Survivors Network.
Can you move the mic closer to you? Thank you.
My name is Tim Law, and I'm here on behalf of Ending Clergy Abuse and Survivors Network of those abused by priests. We oppose 6298 as written. Clergy need to be mandatory reporters without exception. The exception leaves too many questions open to confusion at the expense of children. The questions here by the senators and the councils earlier today typify that. The imminent risk exception does not save this. Clergy are left with too much discretion. Why, if a priest knows abuse has occurred from an 8-year-old confession, that they must remain silent? Survivors see this as a Church Perpetrator Protection Act, not a child safety law, and it's not an appropriate compromise, but a capitulation to the churches.
Thanks so much. Appreciate your testimony today. Jean.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Wilson and committee members, for allowing us to testify on this today. I am Jean Welch-Hill. I represent the Washington State Catholic Conference. We support the mandatory reporting requirements for clergy with the exception of penitential communications in this bill. We do have concerns about Section 6, which could be interpreted to require breaking the seal of confession. We also recognize and appreciate Senate efforts to protect children and maintain religious freedoms. The exemption in the bill is critical to us. The Catholic Sacrament of Reconciliation is unique among religions. It is not a counseling session or judicial process. It is purely a rite of worship like the Mass, following prescribed prayers established in the Order of Penance. The Sacrament of Confession is so critical to our faith, priests who break the seal are automatically excommunicated. In other words, a priest who has foregone marriage and family life to serve their God faces the option of losing his vocation by obeying the law or losing his freedom if he remains true to his priestly vows, a situation the First Amendment and state constitution protect against. We understand and share the motivation behind the legislation. As a church, we have failed to protect children and continue to seek ways to ensure those failures are not repeated. We share your intent to protect children from the lifelong impacts of sexual abuse. We urge support for the definitions in the bill, but also express our concerns should Section 6 be used to force our priests to break their vows.
And if you have any suggestions on that Section 6, would appreciate anything, any language. I'm wondering whether the prime sponsor has any questions at this point. All right. Good morning.
All right. Good morning. Hi. So I'm Christiana De Leon, a resident of Black Diamond and a board member of the Association of Secular Elected Officials, a nationwide 501c3 policy resource hub and advocacy group for fellow electeds who consider themselves atheists, freethinkers, humanists, and other titles that reflect our innate ability to be good without a God. So I'm also a former public school teacher and therefore also a mandated reporter. And I know that there is a lifelong ripple effect of mistrust and harm that results from inaction. The more that we collectively continue to emphasize the importance of holding each other responsible and protecting children from various points of contact through our status as trusted adults, the greater the chances we have of preventing abuse in the first place. Does SB 6298 do everything it needs to? No, it's a compromise, and I think I'll lean in on what Marina was saying earlier about my concerns. That being said, this bill ultimately is pointing towards closing the loophole that was a cause of contention last year. And this is one of the ones that allows abuse to remain a secret if awareness of abuse is obtained in a private setting, such as a confession. So I do say that we'll pass it with those reservations still.
Appreciate your testimony today, and the prime sponsor does have a few questions. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. So, Jean, I just want to clarify. As you know, the amendment, the portion of the bill about the duty to warn, last year, we suggested a duty to warn even if that reasonable belief was informed in whole or in part by penitential communication. The proposal before us only says if informed in part by penitential communication, with the idea that it is a reasonable belief, not necessarily a known fact, and it is informed in part by what is learned outside of the confessional. And so the duty to warn is only something heard in confessional is corroborating a belief informed by facts obtained outside of penitential communication. I want to confirm that that is your understanding, because it is mine, and we are trying to thread a very important needle so that we are not putting your priests in the position of breaking their vows, but rather providing an avenue to interrupt the abuse of children that they reasonably believe is imminent.
Right, and I agree with you. And I think that our concern is, as you and I understand it, I think that our priests do not need to break the seal of confession if they have other information that they can use to make that report. My concern is if a court were to say, we want to know what was said in the confessional, and that would put that priest in that position of breaking the seal.
And Jean, I just want to affirm and clarify
Yeah.
that nothing in this bill changes laws around requirements for priests to testify in court, and that clergy penitent privilege for testimony required in court is a different section of the statute and stays in place and is completely unaffected by this proposal, which is simply addressing the mandated reporter section of the statute, not touching the clergy penitent privilege around testimony in court.
Right.
Is that your understanding as well, Jean?
Now that you've said that, yes, thank you very much for that clarification.
Appreciate that. Appreciate your testimony today as well. We have two more individuals, and then we will close the hearing and move to exec session. Vice Chair Kaufman, you want to call up our last remote panel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have Alex Ashley and Mitch Millen, and they are remote.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the opportunity to express myself this morning. My name is Alex Ashley. I'm from Seattle. As a former ordained minister, as well as a former journalist, I represent myself here today in favor of this bill. Just adding to the comments before me, this reasonable compromise before you today elevates the accountability of religious institutions to the level of privilege that they already enjoy. So it's not an indictment of faith. It's about sending a clear and constitutionally sound message that access to children always comes with increased responsibility. So the shared priority of child safety and closing the gap for organizations who may use legal loopholes to mask negligence as religious freedom, well, that is definitely a shared priority that transcends any divisions we may have when it comes to non-negotiable human rights. Urge each of you please support the bill with unbridled urgency. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. Mitch, if you can turn your camera on and you may begin to speak.
Yes, hello, my name is Mitch Moline. I am from Kittitas County. I am a former Jehovah's Witness, and I'd like to read some recent headlines. Illinois Attorney General finds massive cover-up of clergy sexual abuse. Investigation reveals widespread sexual abuse and cover-up by Archdiocese of Baltimore. Pennsylvania grand jury accuses over 300 priests of abuse, bishops of cover-up. Catholic priest confessed 1,500 times to abusing children. Victim says mandatory reporting could have saved him. It is sad with the bill last year that members of the legislature and lobbyists framed this as an attack on the Catholic faith. This bill is about protecting children. Religious freedom should be respected and upheld, but there should be limits in a modern society. There is no legitimate reason for secrecy when it comes to a child molester or rapist having the freedom to clear their conscience before a priest without fear of accountability. I urge you to support this bill as is if you and your colleagues cannot see a path forward with removing the confession exemption. This compromise bill is better than no law, which Washington shamefully has failed to pass 5 times previously. I'll share more in writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony today. With that, we are closing the hearing on Senate Bill 6298, Clergy Child Abuse Reporting, and that ends our public hearing for today, and we are moving